Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Michelle Washington from the Ohio Department of Education in the Office of Career Connections. Today happens to be National Entrepreneurship Day, and we're grateful to have some great presenters with us for this presentation to give you tools to help empower students to pursue the path of entrepreneurship. And so we're going to go right in. Just a couple of meeting reminders. Be sure to use your mute button if you're not presenting. Use the chat box to ask any questions, and we'll try to address those during the course of this presentation. And please go ahead and introduce yourself. If you have not done so, please list your organization and also your name and if applicable, the school district that you represent. And we'd like to make this an interactive presentation, so feel free to turn on your video as well. And we'll go right into introductions. And our presenters today includes Tom Harvey of SCORE. Tom, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, well, I'll cover my background in my slides, but basically I'm a volunteer with Service Corps of Retired Executives, and I'll give you more information on that in my presentation.
Great. And also we have Young Entrepreneurship Network represented by Kelly Bigger. Kelly, can you go ahead and briefly introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Kelly Bigger, and I'm with the Entrepreneur Institute located in Northeast Ohio, and we believe that every child should learn and experience entrepreneurship. So we're delighted to be here with you in Entrepreneurship Week, and
Risk management group called Assurex Global. I took them from a dozen countries to over 60 countries. I've got a lot of frequent flyer miles. Also was CEO of 4 other companies prior to that, 2 of them being startups, as well as a joint venture. I spent about a dozen years as a partner at a venture capital firm, and I began my career in sales and marketing with Xerox. Next slide. After retiring, I joined the Fisher College at Ohio State, where I developed a course called Entrepreneurial Marketing. But overall, I've been involved with about 30-some companies, a couple of nonprofits. I am what's called a certified small business mentor. I'll tell you about that in a second. And I also organized a monthly gathering of small business leaders We got together every month to talk about ways to drive revenue and ways to be higher quality leaders. The next slide should show SCORE. We are a national organization, all volunteer except for a few paid staff, one in each city. Our goal is to really build small businesses, to strengthen and grow the small business economy. Last year, SCORE launched 30,000 companies and created over 100,000 jobs. There are 4 chapters here in the state of Ohio. I belong to the Columbus chapters, and there are chapters in 3 other locations. What funding we get comes from the Small Business Administration. Next slide, please. Our primary service is mentoring, one-on-one mentoring. We provide coaching for entrepreneurs. We also offer workshops and webinars and online courses to take the entrepreneur basically from the idea stage all the way through to selling his or her business. There's no charge for this. There's generally a modest charge for our seminars, but that's all. So it's basically free. Next slide, small business and startups, critical to our economy, source of a lot of new jobs. There was a 3-year period when the Inc. 500, which are the fastest growing small businesses in America, added jobs, and the Fortune 500 shed jobs. So we're a great source of jobs, very important to our economy. About half of all employees in the private sector work in small business. And a lot of innovations familiar to you and me came from small companies, the personal computer, the copier, overnight delivery, etc. So they're a great resource for our nation. It also can be a lucrative experience. Entrepreneurs make up about 13% of the population and 42% of household wealth. Next slide, please. A lot of people are interested in small businesses. One survey showed 66% would like to start a company, and small companies, or emerging companies as we call them, these are fast track companies, keep big companies competitive. Working in a young company, a lot of advantages. Here's where innovation and flexibility are encouraged. People always do more than the job they're assigned, get great experience. We teach people about risk taking. We can provide great job satisfaction. The satisfaction level of employees in small companies tends to be much better than at large companies. And also there may be an ownership opportunity. One of the few ways to get rich in America besides marrying the boss's daughter or being the boss's son is to own equity in a small, rapidly growing company. Next slide, please. Why do we do it? Well, this is a survey that I think touches on most of the important factors. We've got a nagging thing we want to do. We want to be our own boss. Getting rich, surprisingly, is typically low. Now, being your own boss can imply getting rich. In other words, wealth leads to independence. The other thing is building something of significance. So many entrepreneurs have been involved where they're so proud of what they've done. So that's important that we as human beings do things of significance. Next slide, please. Here's some comments by entrepreneurs about the whole process. We've got to be hardworking. Being in my own business is working 80 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours for somebody else. Passionate. Our first rule is we really have to do something we love. We can't make it any other way. Persistence. Open a business is easy. Keeping it open can be a challenge. Next slide. Entrepreneurs are organized. Every moment is devoted to mobilizing themselves and their people. They're risk takers. I know I'm operating the edge of victory or defeat. A significant screw up can do a lot of damage. We look for challenges. I didn't start the business for the money. I did it for the challenge. I'll probably start another business. I have to. It's addictive. Next slide. Entrepreneurs are visionaries. One of my basic tools is daydreaming. We're looking for ways to, looking for new products, looking for new opportunities. Willing to sacrifice. I build my company around my whole life. Unique. Self-employment is a realistic possibility for the exceptional, not for the average American whose work future is likely to be in large corporations. That was a survey of entrepreneurs, and that were their comments. So it gives you some flavor of how entrepreneurs view themselves. The next part I want to talk about sort of the phases of launching a new business. I'm going to be unable to cover everything here. I'm going to try to touch on a few things I think you'll find of interest. So the 3 basic phases: the development stage. I got an idea. Is it going to be useful for putting into a company? Second, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to launch it. Then the third one is expansion, which basically goes on forever. Next slide. In the development stage are these key steps. I got an idea. Is it a good idea? I got to do market research, building a prototype, doing a concept test, writing the business plan. And should I go ahead now, or is this not really worth the effort? So I'm going to unpack 3 of those parts of the development stage in the next slide. So in the development stage is the idea of market research. Who are my prospects? Who are my competitors? How do I position against them? Why would they buy my product over theirs? What sales and marketing channels do I need to develop to get to my prospects? What are the features of my product? What are the benefits of my product? You got to know the difference between features and benefits. A 10-speed bike, features, 10-speed, benefit, easy to go up and down hills. What's my pricing strategy? A common area of mistake for entrepreneurs. They typically underprice. The next slide deals with concept testing, which is an area near and dear to my heart. I'm working now with several entrepreneurs doing this. First, I asked them, identify 40 people that you think would buy this prospect, but to buy your product or service, and identify them by name. Now let's go out and contact those people. Do it with a webinar, do it over the phone. I prefer to do most of them in person. I show them the concept. This is what I'm planning to produce. Do you see any benefits from this? Do you think it's unique? Do you think it's innovative? Would you buy it? What does this replace? So that whole process is necessary to really shake down whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. And unfortunately, most of the time, it's a bad idea. But it's better to know that at this stage than later on. The next part of the development stage, the next slide, please, is the business plan. I won't touch on all these subjects. You're familiar with most of them, but this is a classic outline of a good business plan. The important part is the summary, the overview. This is a one-page summary of why I should read the rest of this plan. It talks about the company, the market, the competition, how I'm going to present it and sell it, the process of getting the product out the door. Who's my management team? Very important question. And what am I going to build on? Is this a one product company? Is this a product or a company? If it's a company, you better have other products or services in mind. So that's the future development part. Then the financial projections. What's the income statement? What kind of a balance sheet? What kind of financing am I going to need to really get this thing off the ground? So that's pretty much the highlight of the development stage. If you jump to the next slide, this is the startup phase. This is where, yeah, the business plan looks good. I'm going to go ahead. What kind of legal structure do I need? What kind of insurance do I need? How do I start building this team? Very important step. I'll touch on that in a second. How do I finance it? What kind of facility do I need? How am I going to sell and market it? Should I have an advisory board? Can I find people that have done this before that would advise me? The answer to that is yes. It's very easy to put together an advisory board. The unique thing about our culture is we like to help each other. I've done business in foreign countries. America is unique. Ask for help. 80% of the people say, sure. And then pivoting. Sometimes the first plan wasn't quite on target, so we got to pivot, shifting to do something else. Next slide. This is a very important one, building the team. I want to bring people on board that have complementary skills and experience to my own as the founder. If I'm great in sales, I want to find someone that maybe is good on the product development side, or vice versa. Character. Key talking point of my, took me 2 decades to figure this out, that you hire people for what they've done, you fire them for who they are. Character is most important when you're trying to add people to your team. And explain the risks. And we'll talk about risks in a second, but there are big risks in joining a small company. But here's the upside. If we're successful, this is what it's going to look like. And I hope they're excited about it. And then reference check, another area of pet peeves of mine. A lot of people don't reference check. Very important, very important. Next part, financing. Where do I find the money? Well, most of it's going to come from your friends. Here's the survey of where financing comes from. Loans, personal savings, friends, credit cards. Google was launched on credit cards. Angel investors, venture capitalists, a lot of publicity about it, but they do relatively small percentage of the total financing. We'll talk a bit about them because I spent about a dozen years as a venture capitalist, and I can speak from that perspective. And then lastly, sometimes there are grants, and some of my SCORE clients have taken advantage of those, particularly for minorities or women. And that sometimes gives you the necessary walking around money to get these things launched. Next stage, initial sales and marketing. What are the benefits of this? Sell the benefits. You know, if you're a photographer, you don't sell people on all the great cameras you have at a wedding. You sell people on the memories they're going to have. Those are the benefits. Positioning. Why would you buy from me as opposed to other ways, or as opposed to not doing anything? What's my value added? Market segmentation. Who are my real prospects? And how do I segment them by certain demographics? Pricing, I talked about that earlier. Promotion, advertising, social media. Social media is critical today for most companies, but I got to tell you, I'm guessing that this week about a dozen companies will collapse in Ohio, and they'll go under the waves with an awful lot of Facebook likes on board. Just liking me on social media doesn't pay the rent. Also, I always look for friendly lighthouse clients, people that really responded to what I was doing as customers. I tried to develop about a dozen of those, people that I had a close relationship with, people I could call and say, hey, I'm thinking of this, what do you think? That was very important. And then service. Today we are in a service, we got to service it now world. If you're slow on service, you're going to die. That's very important. Next slide, pivoting. Here's where you find out when you bump into the market, I was a little bit off. I got to change. Here's some famous ones you're probably familiar with. YouTube started out as a video dating service. My favorite one is Starbucks. You know, the first Starbucks never sold coffee. They only sold coffee machines and coffee beans. And Uber was a dispatch service for limo. So every one of these successful companies started in one direction and shifted direction after they got engaged with the market. Expansion, that's pretty straightforward. I need more money. I've got to accelerate. I got to do more marketing. I've got to expand my operations, got to build the team. And again, building the team is so important. I would say next to the product service match between what am I going to sell and who am I going to sell it to, the people I surround myself with is probably the second most important decision. And again, it took me 2 decades to figure this out, that as I said, you hire people for what they've done and you fire people for who they are. I've never fired anybody that couldn't do the job. I fired people that wouldn't do the job, but not that they couldn't do the job. So that's my spiel on the new business. Now, a little bit about reality here, and there's some mythology around this whole subject. First of all, entrepreneurs are rugged individualists, go it alone, walking across the Arctic by themselves. Well, not really. 2/3 start their business with one or more colleagues, and the smart ones pick a colleague that has complementary experience. Nextly, college dropouts. The average age of company builders today is not 21. It happens to be around 40, although it slipped into the low 30s in recent studies. And the average experience for those founders is 11 years experience in the target industry. Wild-eyed gamblers. Well, 2/3 keep their old job during the startup phase. So they're not exactly the wild-eyed gamblers we've been led to believe. They need the right business climate. Personal view of opportunity trumps all economic realities. I would predict that during the later phases of this COVID, we're going to have an explosion of new businesses. While half the restaurants will be going out of business, there'll be a number of restaurants going into business. So this could be a great time for entrepreneurs. The government is critical. This is greatly exaggerated. As I tell my students, would you get married if the government gave you engagement rings? The answer is, probably not. And it turns out that what entrepreneurs want is just kind of minimize the regs and the red tape. I'm happy to pay taxes. It's a symbol of my profitability. The government overswings. I remember giving a talk to some legislators recently, and I said, I've run out your tax program, and it's going to be $1,100 in year 2. That isn't going to make a person start a company. So I think our legislators overreact to this idea. Next one, overconfidence. No question about it. 81% believe they have a 30% chance of failure. A third believe they have a 0% chance of failure. Profits can be elusive. It takes 3 years for the average company to be profitable. It's hard work. 43% of entrepreneurs work more than 50 hours a week. And there are disadvantages. And let's be frank. One is generally few of them have any formal training programs. It's on-the-job training. You may not know how to do a job, but you've got to go figure out how to do it. Benefits and pay, frequently not as competitive, typically on the benefit side. I'm struggling right now with a SCORE client that's trying to find a way to do health benefits for their employees. And it's a very costly step, as many of you know. Long hours. This is a very tough job. It's tough. It's tough on your family. And lastly, the security issue. Small companies, you'll see in a second from the next slide, if you go to the next slide, about half of them fail within the first 4 years. So you've got a 50-50 chance of survival. That doesn't smell like security, But to the entrepreneur, that smells like opportunity. It's not going to happen to them. In other words, they believe these odds don't apply to them. Smartphone app, by the way, developers have a higher fatality rate. Only about 30-some% survive the 4-year period. 20-something founders have the lowest likelihood of starting a company with a successful exit. That was an MIT study. Yeah, this is not for the faint-hearted and the inexperienced. As I said, I've engaged with more than 30 entrepreneurs as an investor. I've been a startup entrepreneur myself. And the mistakes that I see and the mistakes that I did were not because either I or my fellow entrepreneurs were stupid. It's just that we didn't know what we didn't know. Experience is really important. So we should encourage our young people to work in a small company first, to see what the realities are. Common causes of failure, no market need. And again, frequently I hear them say, boy, talk to 40 prospects. That's a lot. It is a lot. It's going to take you a long time to do it, but do it. Shake your idea down with real prospects. Run out of cash, typically over optimistic. You can make those projections, but the danger is really don't believe them. I always knocked about 20% off my revenue projections to build my cash flow because inevitably things don't quite work out as the plan envisioned. Management, again, inexperience. It's not stupidity. It's they just didn't know what they didn't know. Poor hiring, hire friends, ignored the character issues, don't do reference checks. This is an area where I taught at a business school. I have an MBA. Did anybody teach me how to hire anybody? No. An area that's really important. Who you build your team with, critical to success. You get out-competed. You typically underestimate your likely competition because frequently what you'll do, and this is the danger of a concept test, you'll go out with your yet to be developed idea and compare it to a competitor's product that's been in the market for some time. What are they going to do when they see your product? How are they going to respond? You've got to try to anticipate that because that's going to be the real competition next year. Pricing. Frequently entrepreneurs price too low. Frequently entrepreneurs don't even know the total cost of what they're doing. Got to get your arms around that. And lastly, poor marketing. Most surveys show failure is due to marketing and finance. Another reality check is outsiders. If I'm going to go to my banker or an angel investor or even a relative, hey, I need money for this venture. How do I do it? They're going to want to know things like, what's the market? Can you prove that? Who are your competitors? And why are you different or better? What do you do that's unique? What do you do that's hard to copy? What distinguishes your management team? You ever done anything like this before? Can you attract people? Can you raise money? Can you sell clients? Are your projections reasonable as well as ambitious? A few months ago, I had a score client that his revenue projection was $4 trillion. Now, $4 trillion is larger than the gross domestic product of Germany. That would have made him the 4th largest nation. I would call that ambitious, but not very realistic. What do clients say? Your investors are going to want to talk to your customers. They may want to talk to your prospects. What are they going to say about you? They like you? They don't like you? They like your product? They don't like your product? Be prepared to provide reference lists for anyone who's going to put money in your company. Lastly, the last point on reality check, I think it's the last point. No, second last point. Investors, they're going to take 2 to 4 months to do their evaluation. And about 10% of the companies they consider. In other words, when I was with a venture capital firm, we got about 400 companies a year approached us for money. We did serious research on about 40 of those companies, and we invested in 4. So you've got to kiss a lot of frogs when you're out raising money. Investors are going to look for a 5 times return within 5 to 7 years, typically by selling your company to somebody else, not going public. That's very seldom the way they get liquidity. So you got to face that reality. If you go out and ask outside investors, like venture capitalists or angel investors, your future might be working for somebody else. Now that's 5 to 7 years down the road, but you got to think about that. Now, why do they seek such a high return? The reality is we're not that good at our business, at our job. 3 or 4 companies backed by venture capitalists didn't return any money. Half of all companies backed fail outright. So their batting average is not too good. So they need to find a high return for everything that they put their money in. And frankly, very few go to early stage companies. Less than 20% of venture capital or even angel money goes to what we call pre-revenue companies. You've got to have that product out in the market. You've got to show some traction with clients and prospects before you can seriously entertain them. And then the next slide is not for everybody. 95% of entrepreneurs tell us that most Americans don't understand how hard it is, don't understand how to build a successful company. But when you ask them again, would you do it over again? Yeah, I would. Absolutely. Now, as far as high schools are concerned, next slide. I think it's great. We're encouraging teenagers to think about entrepreneurship. I think it's wonderful. In fact, surveys show that a lot of them are very interested in it, and a few of them actually have started their business. In fact, a significant percentage of entrepreneurs actually started their companies when they were quite young. Next slide. Here's an example of some high school entrepreneurs and things that they've done and all across the country, and some of them raise money. So it's a very exciting arena to think about young entrepreneurs. The key to them is surrounding themselves with seasoned people, either as employees or advisors. And it's an exciting time, and it's a great time to promote this whole concept of entrepreneurship. We desperately need it. And last night, I will entertain questions, comments, observations, etc. So I've left some time, I think, for everybody to throw in their 2 cents. And please ask questions. Hope it didn't go too fast.
So there was one question in the chat referring to SCORE and the services offered. And someone was asking how much hand-holding is actually provided for startups. And I think that would be imperative with students and helping our students. So if you don't mind answering that question, how much is provided in terms of services, hand-holding for students or anyone interested in entrepreneurship by SCORE?
Sure. I've been a SCORE volunteer now. I've completed 2 years of doing it. And as I said, I'm engaged with about a half a dozen each week. To be honest, I've never seen a high school student. There's no reason they would be turned away, however. But I have seen young people, and they approach me with ideas, and I coach them on how to assess those ideas. I encourage them to interact with real-time prospects, and I'll show them how to do that. And then when it comes to the business plan, I will coach them in how to write and develop a business plan. I'm doing that now with a couple of entrepreneurs. And so those services are available to young students, although frankly, I've never seen a high school student knock on our door. We wouldn't turn them away.
There's another question for you. Do students need anything to start other than a local business license? Should they immediately get the license, or is that something that comes further down the road?
Well, first of all, let's use hunting as an analogy. You need a hunting license to hunt. The first question is, do you really want to hunt? Do you have a gun? Do you have something to kill the animal with? Is that something you think you're going to enjoy? I would go hunting with somebody else before I purchased a gun. So the idea here is, first things first. There's something called the product or service match. I've got an idea for a product or a service. How does it match up with what I perceive to be my prospects? You need to shake that down with prospects, and we'll teach people how to do that before you worry about licensing. Licensing is frankly easy. There are a lot of people that will help you with that. The idea is it something that anybody wants to buy? Then figure out how to get a license to do it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Someone else asked, what about age limits and recording status, profit or non-profit? And again, this goes along those lines of licensing.
Yeah, well, SCORE entertains nonprofits. We have a lot of nonprofits that we coach. And for licensing, we will point them in the right direction. If they need licenses, we'll coach them in that arena. Is that the question?
They were asking also, are there age limits for recording? I believe it's recording if it's a for-profit business or non-profit business. Is that correct, Lonnie? She said that's correct.
Are there age limits?
Yes.
To create a nonprofit company? Can a 9-year-old go out and create a nonprofit company? You'd have to ask a lawyer that question. I honestly don't know. I suppose they could if they got an adult to sign for it, but you know, that's the part of the business that's really the easy part. The mechanics. People get all locked up. How do we get a license? How do I incorporate? That stuff is easy. The tough thing, does anybody want to buy what I'm selling? That's the question where companies die. It's not that I didn't have a license. I mean, you can get licenses and lawyers and legal help. I mean, again, that's generally not holding people back. What holding people back is, have you tested your idea on anybody besides your Uncle Louie? You go out and talk to strangers that might buy this product. What do you think? That's the important. That's where the rubber meets the road. The other stuff, it's kind of easy, actually. The mechanics of starting the company, getting the licenses, that stuff, that's easy. That's the easy stuff. The tough stuff, does anybody want to buy what I'm selling? That's why companies fail.
Can you talk more about that for our educators that are teaching entrepreneurship classes, giving them more insight into what they should be steering students towards in terms of some more insight into research and doing the groundwork?
Well, first of all, they need to come up with a product concept. In other words, this is what I'd like to produce or deliver or a service. They need to identify who those buyers might be.